So I was always a very intuitive child. I could tell my parents all sorts of things that had happened that there was no way of corroborating. So they were a bit uncomfortable, I suppose, with the things that their child was coming out of. And I think, you know, that's generally par for the course. Most parents want to reassure their children, but in doing so, kind of, you know, begin to shut down their children's gifts. So I suppose it became a bit of an inconvenience. So because I'm claircognizant, I didn't see spirits, but I knew they were there, but there wasn't really a word for that, or certainly not in common parlance. So I just began to kind of move away from it really and just tune out and assume that it was in my imagination. But we did grow up in a very old house with a lot of spiritual activity, and I used to just know the places that I didn't want to be and what was happening, but without really articulating it beyond a point. And then in my teen years, as most people do, you totally shut it down because hormonally you've got so much going on. It would just be quite overwhelming to have that running in tandem. So yeah, I think when I've always been intuitive, I've always kind of listened to that inner knowing, but then came my mid-30s and that was my reawakening, and it was a Kundalini awakening, and it came like a lightning bolt, and it was as if all the dials were switched up on every sense really. So everything was loud, everything was demanding my attention, the lights were bright. It was just, you know, probably what would have been a diagnosable thing in Western medicine, but really is the truth of it is an awakening and you recalibrating, I suppose, to the different realms that want to be in communication. And because I'm an open channel, everything wanted to communicate with me. So the consciousness of everything was trying to have a chat. So I began 2 years of a process, which was, getting some boundaries in place that would protect me and make it so I could live comfortably in this world without being overwhelmed, and get it to a point where it was no longer felt like a curse and it felt like the blessing that it is, and I could actually help people with it. So I speak to various consciousnesses. So that is really, when I say consciousnesses, either a soul or a collection of souls that want to communicate with you. It's an intellect, it's an energy with an intellect, I suppose. So I have my team of guides, so that's generally, when I channel messages, it's generally them. If I put something out publicly, it's quite often the Pleiadian Collective, which are ninth dimensional beings, which most of us has had previous lives in connection with. Most people will resonate on some level, even if they don't understand the term, with the term starseeds. And because our souls aren't from Earth, they are, multidimensional, and they come from different planetary origins and different star systems. We accrue different experiences from visiting these different places. And I have a very strong Pleiadian connection. So anyone who has a real resonance and kind of works for women and children, really, that's kind of a very Pleiadian energy. So if you find yourself, working in those fields, or, having a very strong girl tribe, or, just sorority, I suppose, because Pleiades is known as the seven stars or seven sisters. So it's kind of that ethos. So where was I going with this? So multiple different consciousness that I communicate with. Typically when I do readings for people, it's their guides. But what I tend to find is there's an overlap in the teams of guidance. So generally a lot of my spirit guides will be their spirit guides as well. It all joins up eventually. Generally either word of mouth, or Instagram, or YouTube. And yeah, it's the underpinning things are generally audience is between 35 and 60. So I suppose that's fairly broad. Mostly female, because I guess of that Palladian connection and resonance with working with women, I suppose. But I also have probably a 15% of male. Um, Messed up. Uh, yes, yeah, totally. But I just went blank. Yeah, so I suppose I have a small proportion of male clients who are definitely leading the way for men and this evolution of consciousness, really. So they're kind of front runners, and that's a real privilege, and I love that. Really love that element. So they are very much working on anchoring that divine masculine role within their lives, and just as we evolve into this Aquarian age, leading the way, and setting the example for so many people who don't really know how to get out of the trappings of the ego mind and what society, the walls society, is kind of built around people to keep them reduced. So it's primarily women, but as I say, I've got a small contingent of men who come for readings. And the reason why is normally because they're feeling like things are shifting in their life and they feel out of control. And they know that they need to welcome in change and actively create change, but feel lost as to how to do it. And it's really for that guidance that they're coming for pointers on. So I think it's very important for any energy worker to actually ask for permission. So obviously someone coming for a reading by its very nature is granting that access. But it's amazing the level of openness that people come with, or not. Sometimes there have been occasions where I've actually sent people away because whilst they do want the reading, they're not quite ready for it yet. They have to work on their nervous system a little more and their trust issues before allowing that access. But that's very rare. So most people come with a real willingness, but typically the people that I attract are massively empathic, so they carry energy in ways that create problems for them. So a key part of the reading is actually reading how they carry that energy and the damage or the ramifications of that presentation of energy within them, and really teaching them ways and signposting things for their attention to kind of get a better balance and to manage their own chakras and how they carry that energy. And, you know, the underpinning thing for most things is putting some boundaries in place. And they're usually aware that that has to happen, but don't quite have the roadmap as to, how that can be navigated. They don't need to prepare if you're going for a reading with me. I think as humans we have a massive tendency to overthink things, and actually what they're really doing is handing over the burden of that nagging mind for me to kind of just unlock things for them and to override that, not in a way that's disempowering, but quite the opposite. It's a way to kind of get them to look beyond, to observe, and to start to begin to access their intuition and the deeper parts of their knowingness, in order to kind of, I suppose, bring into fruition all the things that they're wanting to, that they know they and feel they need to, but just become locked into the systems, I suppose, that we give away our power to. So generally, I give people a bit of a warning as to my weird tics and quirks that happen, because when I track energy, so whether that's incoming or outgoing, but obviously a large chunk of the reading is both of those things. So I'm releasing energy from them that's been trapped, that's negative, that we need to kind of get rid of and to release them from. But there's a lot of incoming light codes and activations, and generally the frequency that I'm channeling is you know, high voltage, I suppose. So there's a lot of energy tracking, which means my face dances around quite a lot, and my tick. So I do warn people that don't worry, I'm not having a seizure or anything like that beforehand, because I think if you're coming cold to it, it might be a bit alarming, like what my face does. Yeah. I think many people who come to me go through a huge range of emotions actually throughout the reading. So I tend to start with an energy clearance. It depends from person to person, so I just intuitively do what I think's right. But it's a good place to start initially because it shows me how they carry energy, and we release a lot of things that have got stuck. Because typically most people who see me are empaths. So what they do is they somatize emotions. So they physically transmute it through their body, through carrying other people's, emotions and traumas. And it quite often gets trapped because we're definitely in this culture where we're not really allowed, we're uncomfortable with feeling all of our emotions. And when things are incomplete, they just get trapped. So it's a case of releasing those. So obviously in that process, they will feel lighter, but some people have, an emotional response, so they might cry. But it's always filled with plenty of laughter as well. I always think it's very balanced, and the guides are very intentional with their delivery of things. So I think people are often worried that they're going to be told bad news and stuff like that, but they're so positive. Not unrealistically positive, but they attune you to all the possibilities that are available, which we count ourselves out of typically as humans. So I suppose people who come to me sometimes come because they've lost a loved one. And normally I am able to put them in touch with them, but that's not really my raison d'etre. It's really a case of I'm a channel. So what my specific role is to connect them with their higher guidance and to connect them more with that knowingness within themselves. And that's really my kind of approach to things, and my guides and their guides' approach to things. That's the intention behind it. Inevitably, as an open channel, loved ones do take the opportunity to come through. But I would probably advise specifically seeing a medium with that, if that's your intention. But what's beautiful about it is I kind of feel the presence of loved ones and their spiritual entourage, I suppose, their ancestral spiritual entourage, who want to communicate all sorts of beautiful messages through me, which is a pleasure. But I don't typically get their names, so by process of elimination, I feel into who it is. But I don't get that. That's just not my thing, I suppose. Well, I suppose I don't really know what a psychic looks like, other than the typical fairground thing with, big Pat Butcher earrings and a head tie. Um, but it's interesting. I think my team of guides have very much described me as what they call a bridge. So it's probably to kind of go under the guise of looking a bit mainstream to kind of softly allow people to step across and explore something that they would have felt uncomfortable to do with someone who looked very different to them. So occasionally people just come for one session. I think most people come with that intention. They come at a pivotal period in their life where they just want that extra bit of guidance. And I'm definitely not one to encourage very regular attendance, because I definitely think my purpose, and certainly my guidance team's intention, is to really tune people back into their own intuition so that they're not deferring to external people all the time. But I definitely have wonderful ongoing relationships with probably 95% of my clients, who come back sort of every 3-4 months or so, just to get insights in the next phase. So it's typically once they've completed some massive hurdles in their own healing journey and their own intuition attunement, to kind of just get a different take on things. And also probably an element of wanting a pat on the back, because it's incredible the progress that people make. And because of the energy clearance aspect of the reading, it's amazing to actually be able to track people's progress by how they carry energy of both their own and other people's. Because what I typically find is their inner dialogue has improved, because typically people carry a lot of energy around the ears when they've got a very negative self-talk going on. And that is one of the things that brings the biggest shift in people, because it unlocks a whole series of other possibilities to them, because they finally believe in themselves. They actually think they deserve stuff that they would have counted themselves out of previously. So yeah, it has profound effects, and it's lovely to see people for that follow-up. I call them chakras. They're not really chakras, but honestly, like the release in the ears, like, and if that's the case, their digestive system shut down. There's so many knock-ons. Yeah, I mean, most of my clients have some sort of autoimmune disease, or most sensitives have digestive issues because they've shut down their digestive tract. They're not producing enough enzymes. It creates leaky gut, so they get all the intolerances. So all stuff that yeah. So the beginning of working with me full stop is always a full intuitive reading. So that's an hour and a half long, and it is, yeah, really comprehensive, but not in a scary way. And it's a very positive experience. It's very empowering. Begins with an energy clearance to see how people, very importantly, carry energy across their chakras. And as most of my clients are very empathic people, then that's a real telltale. And it normally comes with direct knock-on effects in terms of their physical health as well as their mental health. So we really have the opportunity to change their trajectory in terms of their healing journey. And then most of the reading itself will be totally channeled, so I don't use any form of divination. It just comes through me, and it's a mixture of their guides and mine, because normally, there's a crossover in our guidance teams anyway. So it always feels like a very familiar voice coming through. And, occasionally, or more often than not, I would probably say, loved ones also come through, although it's not the intention. The intention is really to get them back to their personal power, give them some proper direction, some practical steps, and some pointers as to how they can manage their own energetic fields better. Yeah, so there's a reduced rate for ongoing hour and a half readings for people if they've worked with me previously, and there's also a half an hour catch up, which is great for if you have something cropped up in your life, just to get that extra ratification on. And it's just a lovely way of just touching base and tracking progress, really, which is not for me to judge, but it's really nice for me to observe and to, just put in further guidance. This very much overlaps with, I suppose, what would be a conventional counselling session. It very much, dances between the two, and it's whatever they need. And that's the beauty with channeling, is it gives you whatever it is that you're missing. Like, it can provide that because it intuitively knows, and it's like an adaptogen. It just delivers what you need. So I do a service called Pocket Guidance, which is all primarily based on the phone. So we can WhatsApp, we can message on that, or we can call. But it's very much to arm people with support when they're going through a very tumultuous time, whether that's a divorce or a grief, or whatever it is, or a career change that's kind of multifaceted, or a house move. But whatever it is, it's been a case that it's holding a lot of what's the word? It's just taking up a lot of space within that person, understandably. that needs just an additional siphoning off of the negative energy that they're kind of acquiring whilst they're going through that very challenging period of time. So, yeah, I generally do it month by month. And, you know, a couple of months normally gets someone through that with a real sort of backbone of support added by the channeled guidance that they receive, to kind of galvanize them and just allow them to step into that period of challenge with as much strength and tenacity as can be possible. Yes, generally, I always encourage like a first reading initially. I think that's really important. And it's just available to them if they're pretty, you know, certain that they're going to use that service. Again, it would be for people who are undergoing a significant period of change. And I think in that scenario, it's quite often when people are having their own awakening and need someone to bounce things off and kind of make sense of their experiences. And yeah, it's just extra support and ratification of the experiences that they're going through, really, and also to challenge them to kind of broaden their perspective on things. Oh, Cambo is absolutely amazing. So it's known as Cambo, it's known as Sapo. So that is an indigenous medicine. So it's primarily from, well, it is from Amazonia, over Peru and Brazil. And the indigenous tribes, there are numerous that actually utilize it, although it goes under different techniques and different names and different methodologies in terms of both administering and you know, kind of managing your physical manifestation of that. But it's a game changer, and the people who I've kind of walked through Cambo experiences with have had such profound shifts and changes in their life because they've got rid of trauma, deeply embedded trauma, and that's the beauty with Cambo. And you know, it's not an easy process to go through, so it takes a lot of bravery to actually embark upon that in the first place. And that shows you the strength of character that people who have endured trauma often have, that they are prepared to take on what to some would be sound like a very traumatic process. But it's like having a stomach bug for you know, probably half an hour generally. So it's very intense, comes on fast. I only attract sensitive people, and primarily it's only going to be sensitives who are drawn towards Cambo and working with it. But it alleviates them of what many of the tribes call panema, which is low vibrational energy, which kind of gets trapped. So it goes back to this notion of somatizing emotion. So when we feel something incompletely, in the case of trauma, generally that's shut down. So it gets trapped, incompletely felt somewhere in the body, and we have to release it. And the beauty with Cambo is it releases on multiple levels. So it also goes into the mental body, it also goes into, well, it definitely works on the physical body, but it also goes into the energetic body as well, so the spiritual. And I guess as a psychic, my stance on it is very much from the spiritual aspect. And Kampu for me is the spirit behind the modality of Kambo, and works with each person individually to encourage them to open up as much of that energy body and their emotional body to get the maximum release. So when I do an energy clearance, it's powerful, but Kambo reaches in and encourages a release from much deeper layers than I can ordinarily reach, because it's working with the soul of that individual, and as I say, in a way that I think any human finds at this point in time and level of consciousness is able to do. So it's massive. The release is just incredible. So I've had people who have had just the most debilitating depression just walking with a spring in their step again, are motivated for life, can access joy. It's just, just the biggest pleasure to be able to deliver that. So yeah, I'm a massive advocate.
Does it kind of go hand in hand with like your readings? Do you other readings incorporated in it, or is it just solely
No, it's just the modality. I think doing what I do, and I think most practitioners for Cambo do it to an extent. There's an additional push, so it matters who you go to for Cambo, because we're putting some energy behind it as well. But the modality itself, so when I use Cambo myself personally, I just self-administer, so no one's helping with the push of that. It is purely the spirit behind Cambo and the physical elements of the modality, which is multiple different peptides working. And even though scientifically, obviously, we know in the culture that we live in, it's not going to be massively advocated or explored, and it's going to be demonized, and that's fine. Let people get on with that. So it's very much when you're self-actualizing and you're taking responsibility for your own health journey, and you are developing in your levels of consciousness, do you come to this modality? So I'm not one for overly trying to convince people about its worth or anything like that. I think you'll see the value when you're ready to see the value, and at that point, come and see me. Cambo actually comes from a giant monkey tree frog in Amazonia. So it's sustainable the way it's harvested now, and no frogs are harmed in the making, which I think is the most important thing. And when I was called to do the training, that was like my primary concern. I was like, I hope no frogs are harmed. Once I'd investigated that, I was totally comfortable with it. And it's very much an offering. So it's actually a collection of peptides that work within the body to create like a lymphatic flush. And it also purges your bile. So how it's administered, which doesn't sound the most appealing, not going to lie, is through some small incense burns. So we just burn them either on the arm. In women, we quite often do it on the inner ankle. Or you can have it on the back of the neck. In some of the indigenous tribes, they have it on the chest. I sometimes do it on myself on the tummy. But we discuss the placement of it. Most people, they're not too bothered. They think it's sounded a lot worse than it is in reality. And then we administer the Cambo itself. That is so powerful. So it's not a pleasant process, and that's the point. It's meant to purge you, and purge it certainly does. So it's like having a stomach bug for up to 35, 45 minutes max. I've never seen it go on beyond that. So the beauty of that is the discomfort is finite, and that is, amazing. As you're sitting through it going, why did I do this? You can always come back to the going, oh, it's nearly over. And yes, you are certainly sick. That is, the goal of it. That's the intention. We want to allow for a bile release. So we make sure, sorry, this isn't nice, but we have bile in the sick bucket. It's a fasted process, so I primarily do ceremonies in the morning or allow someone to have a big breakfast and then do it 8 hours afterwards. But you can have electrolytes and plenty of fluids. That's not so in terms of how unpleasant that bowl is, it's not that bad at all because there's nothing in your tummy. But we get you to drink a lot of water during the process because that is, key to actually helping the flush itself. And yeah, so it's over pretty quickly, and the effects are so profound that I haven't had a single client that hasn't come back for a second one to just, continue the incredible healing process that it initiates.